King Lear, a very brief introduction before we get into the granular detail of the act and scene summaries and the analysis of the different characters and the various different themes and plot lines. Let's just give ourselves a reminder. Most of you would have read this in 5th year. Let's give ourselves a reminder of an overview here. So this is, for most of you, going to be your single text. It's examined on paper 2, section 1. There'll be 2 questions. You have to answer one. The questions are worth 60 marks. So the overall value of this section to you is 16.5%. It's a section of the course that a lot of students struggle with, the Shakespeare play. It is a section that doesn't need to be difficult. The core aim here, well, it's 2 core aims here. Number 1, the one you want, is that by the time we get to next June and you walk into the exam, doesn't matter what questions come up. You're not going to feel nervous at all because you're going to know the play. Most people go into the exam, they don't know their play. They know on a very superficial level some things. You stick with me and you're going to know this play. You're going to know what you need to know in terms of the detail of the characters, the plots, the themes, the language, the imagery, the quotation. But you're also going to know how to write about the play, the kinds of questions that get asked and how to go about answering them successfully. What we're going to look at here today is the second part of my aims. And the second part of my aim is to get you to like the play. I love this play. I love books, and this is my favourite book. So try and approach your study of King Lear this year in a way that understands that it's more about the leaving cert. It's about being an educated person. It's about, for once, maybe, hopefully not, in your life, enjoying Shakespeare. Because it is a brilliant play. And if you just relax and approach it in a positive manner, and I'm going to try and help you do that, you're going to enjoy it. Now that'll be my second aim. Of course, if I achieve my second aim, I'm going to be much more likely to achieve my first aim, which means that you're going to go into the exam and write about the play with confidence. A very, very brief overview. I know most of you know what I'm about to say already from 5th year before we get into the next video, and all the ones after that in which we go through the act and scenes. So the play is, most of all, I think, about the human experience. The reason I can relate to Lear, the reason I can really feel a sense of empathy with him, but also find that this play resonates with me in 2024, as I stand here today, I feel this play is very modern, is because it's a play about, things that happen to us and things that we experience in our own lives. It's a play about love and family. It's a play about humanity's capacity for good, but also how bad we can be. It's a play about identity, integrity, what we're willing to do to get what we want. That's tied to jealousy, ambition, and morality. And it's a play, for me, about power, about where power comes from, and about how it's used. And I think in many ways the play is about how power is abused and about how that abuse can have devastating and tragic consequences. At the core of the play, of course, is our friend Lear, and he is a tragic hero. The word eponymous means the play is named after him. A tragic hero, we'll talk about this in much more detail when we do the King Lear mind map, but essentially what it means is a character who is possessed of strengths and qualities that we admire, but whose fate is undermined by a fatal flaw. Some of your teachers may use the term hamartia, but the fatal flaw is a weakness in his character that causes him to lose all of his advantages, leads to his destruction. For Lear, it's hubris. And we're going to learn all of the synonyms of hubris: pride, egoism, arrogance, pomposity. We learn all of those as we go through. But essentially, Lear was told when he was small, God picked you to rule. And everybody in the kingdom has told him that's the case for his whole life. He's been the king for decades. and he's lost sight of his capacity to be fallible. To be fallible means to possess the capability of making mistakes. And Lear, in this play, is a portrayal of a man who believes himself to be infallible and who has to learn in a very, very, very harsh way the lesson that nobody is infallible. A very brief run through. Lear is a play in which we look at two families. We know that, and those two families, their stories are explored through the two plots. We have Lear and his daughters, Goneril, Regan and Cordelia. And then, of course, we have Gloucester and his sons, Edgar and Edmund, two utterly fascinating characters. We know that there are also some sub or minor characters or less important characters. For example, Albany and Cornwall, who are married respectively to Goneril and Regan and play a really important role, particularly in the second half of the play. And the King of France, who from the end of Act 1, Scene 1, marries Cordelia. Now, he doesn't play a very important role at all in the play, but it's just important to understand how Cordelia is able to raise an army in the second half of the play, and that's through her marriage. And then you have people like Kent and the Fool, two of the most fascinating characters that Shakespeare has ever created. Kent, this kind of, gritty portrayal of just human loyalty and decency. And the Fool, one of the most fascinating and complex characters that Shakespeare has ever created, who comes out with some of the best lines that Shakespeare ever wrote in the play. That Shakespeare ever wrote in this play. We know that and we're going to go through Act 1, Scene 1 in 3 videos after this, but we know that at the very beginning we meet Edmund, and he's illegitimate, so his mom and dad weren't married when he was born, and of course that attaches a stigma to him, a sense of shame. He's an outcast, he's ostracized by society because of the fact his parents weren't born, and that creates a sense of resentment and determination that he's not going to allow his life to be dictated by that. But then you get to the main, catalyst, the main driving force of the plot, which is the abdication and the love test. And the abdication, of course, is Lear's decision to give up the throne. We get into the idea of the divine right of kings as we go through the play, but essentially people in Shakespeare's time believed that their kings or queens were picked by God to rule on his or her behalf. And therefore, to serve the king was to serve God. But also the king or queen had a duty to serve the people, and by serving the people, they served God. Lear makes a decision to give up his throne. That's what abdication means. And in doing so, he makes a decision it's not his to make, it's God's decision who rules. And by making that decision, he disrupts what is called a natural order, and that leads to chaos in the kingdom. So we know that Lear is a man who decides to abdicate. He also decides to divide his kingdom, and at the same time as he abdicates and divides his kingdom, he then decides that he won't give up all of the trappings of power and decides to hold on to this retinue of 100 knights. So essentially, and we go through it shortly, in the first scene, Lear just makes mistake after mistake after mistake and causes chaos in the kingdom. That chaos leads to untold suffering, and that's where the action of the play begins. As I said, it's really important that you get a handle on why Lear does what he does. It's really important that we think about terms like egoism, like vanity, that we understand that he is so vain, so egotistical, so arrogant, so hubristic, that it blinds him to his daughter's sycophantic behaviour. Sycophantic means when somebody flatters you in order to gain advantage. This is what Goneril and Regan do at the beginning of the play. And it also blinds him to the integrity, the decency, the fundamental honourable character of his youngest child, Cordelia. And his abusive power towards Cordelia, and indeed towards the Duke of Kent in the first act of the play, really alienates us as an audience from him. His abusive power over Goneril and Regan, forcing them to take part in the love test and humiliate themselves in order to gain power, again, alienates us as an audience And that's when his journey in the play begins. And of course, you're going to learn one of the most important things to bear in mind when we're thinking about Lear as this analysis goes forward is how Shakespeare manages to transform him from a man in the first act who we just don't like. He's foolish, as I said, he's abusive, he's cruel, he's blind, he's vain. But by the end of the play, we feel sorry for him. And indeed, we feel a sense of empathy or fellow feeling with him. And Shakespeare's, one of the great things about this play, one of the great things that Shakespeare does is manage that transformation so well for an audience.